All right, good morning, and yes, I am a Cubs fan. Sorry. So great to be here. Thanks so much. We're going to talk about using influence for good, and I'm real pleased to be here with Paul Katz, whom I've known for a long time. And prior to my trip here, I did a read of Paul's book, which is called Good Influence: How to Engage Influencers for Purpose and Profit. And I was cramming for the test here. And it was, I found it to be an excellent book, and I'll tell you why. Because it gives a lot of practical advice for how you can engage influencers and celebrities at whatever level organization you are, whether you're international, national, or very, very local to your own town. So I think it's a great handbook, and it has a lot of case studies that Paul walks through his long career working with influencers, and shows how you can engage them and keep them as part of the causes that your club cares about. And I love a deal. And we have a deal here that Paul is generously offering to send a free book to any Rotary Club in this group that wants one, which is pretty cool. So we're gonna keep this practical about what you could do potentially to engage influencers in your area. So Paul, you've had a tremendous career, a lot of which I did not know until I read this book. Was for sure I knew that you started off with a British-American record label, Jive Records, and in that you worked with Hollywood star Will Smith, pop singers like Justin Timberlake, Backstreet Boys, Celine Dion, etc. And I understand that music experience was part of what got you into using influence for good. And in fact, you went to a concert that you were backstage, and it kind of gave you this revelation. It wasn't just any concert. So go ahead and give us a...
First of all, thank you so much for the invitation. It's such an honor to be part of the Rotary Super District, 6400. And so coming from the entertainment business and music in particular, I could see the positive effects that art and music have on folk. And this was particularly apparent when I was, I think it was like our third week. We came to the States for a year 40 years ago, but this was in the, it must have been 85, I think, was Live Aid. I don't know if people remember that, which raised a lot of money it was famine in Ethiopia originally, and out of that actually came the American We Are the World. That also came out of that. So for me, I could see the power of music to make social change. And I think we had a fantastic example with Gabby yesterday, where there's somebody who's a local musician that's gaining prominence, that has been engaged with Rotary at a local level and will grow. She's now a Grammy winner, which is fantastic. And you can see she's passionate about it. It's not an addendum to her career. It's nothing. It's because she feels it from the heart. And I think that's really important. So at a local, we've dealt on the Worldwide Polio campaign. We've had some very big folks involved in that. But on a local level, I think it's just as possible, and you don't need to, be in the business to be able to do that. So, yeah.
Yeah, so and then you kind of figured that out quickly. You started your own agency, Entertain Impact. You started working with a whole bunch of other celebrities, and I'll note them just because I think it shows that you bridged over to more of the movie side, Hollywoods and stuff like that, with the Oscar winner Green Book. You played a part in the development of that, and then also you worked with Harrison Ford, and then you bridged other people like Jeff Skoll, who is the Canadian entrepreneur, of course, and John Legend, as was mentioned. So I guess the basic question for you is, why engage influencers? Why?
Okay, I just want to comment on the Harrison Ford thing, because people will think it's from a movie. I have never worked with Harrison Ford on a movie. I don't know Harrison Ford, or didn't, and I actually reached out to him completely cold, for a group called the Environmental Defense Fund, which was working on preserving some national parks, and met him actually at Santa Monica Airport, because he's a big pilot. So the point I wanted to make there is that you don't have to know people. It's very possible just to reach out, as long as you're polite and you know how to do it and be persistent. So why influencers? It's because an influencer will gain, if it's the right one. And so what's an influencer? I'm sure we all have our own definitions, but for me, it is a public figure that is culturally appropriate for the audience that you want. I'm going to go very differently in terms of my outreach for somebody who may appeal to young people, may appeal to older people. They're different folk. You know, maybe it's a campaign that you're doing in Guatemala. I'll look for somebody who has a connection with Guatemala or literacy. But generally, I think you're going to raise awareness, you're going to raise support, and you're going to raise funds in a more productive fashion. And I could give you an example, if I may. I know, for example, on the kind of the cold turkey thing, the LA chapter reached out to Jimmy Kimmel, I believe, after the LA fires. I know there's a Rotary Club in Lexington, Kentucky, that's done exactly that with local celebrities for literacy. And then there's one I talk about in my book, which is I think it's called the Arthur Clarke Dance. There's a studio, there's a whole organization, and the lady there unfortunately lost her husband to cancer and started this Dancing with the Stars annual event where she'd bring people from the local community in Minneapolis. And that's been going for 6, 7, 8 years and has raised nearly $3 million for local charities. So it's very feasible to do it, as you say, at every level.
And, you know, for this audience, I guess the question may be, why would a Rotary Club want to engage an influencer? And and I think people might be sitting in the audience saying, this sounds like this is for somebody else. It's A-listers, it's Hollywood types. Why should my Rotary Club engage influencers?
I think we saw a fantastic example last night. Thank you for arranging that. But if I'm doing a golf tournament to raise money for a project, if I'm doing an event, if I can get the local anchor on the TV station to come along, or if there's an actor in the community. I know Dave Chappelle, for example, lives in his local community in Ohio. He does huge amounts there. He doesn't talk about it, but he does a lot of good for the community. And I think what it'll do is just simply introduce more people to Rotary, not just within the Rotarian community, which is obviously very positive, but it brings it beyond there. And I think also, if you get the right influencers, whether traditional or social media, I think you're going to actually attract younger members. I think that's as well as donations. I think there's lots of positives.
And I know actually an example that I actually with past President Jen Jones, we were in Taiwan. She was there with a colleague of mine and dedicating a project that was part of the Imagine tour that Jen had. And they had engaged very local influencers, which was a president of a local university and a prominent doctor. And those folks were not just there to be at the event. They actually were part of the project the whole way through. And that made this actually get a lot of media coverage as a result in the local area. So I think there's real practical stories and things that people can do to make that happen. And I know that actually happens quite a bit in Rotary. I think what we're talking about is really keeping those folks engaged too. So if you could kind of give me a sense of what are some of the steps that you could do if you're starting off and you're ready to act. We've convinced folks that let's do this. Let's try to get some influence to really be supporters of our club. What would they do?
I think the first thing is to do it, right? Because a lot of people feel like I can't do this, but I know so many local nonprofits, membership organizations that have just reached out to people, and they're There's a methodology, which I'll talk about, and they've been successful. So there's no obstacle. So the way I've done it, I've kind of come up with this an acronym, DREAM. So you design your initiative, your campaign, whatever you want to call it. You then research, because research is really the key for me. If I want to deal with homelessness, I'm going to go to certain people, like Kelly Clarkson was homeless, for example. If I'm going to deal with, we talked about Kevin Bacon before. Kevin's brother Michael is a cancer survivor. So Kevin and Michael I've worked with a lot in terms of raising money for rare cancers. So you do the research, then you have the engagement, or not the engagement, kind of reaching out. I guess engage is the right word. How do you do that? Very simple email and a bit of persistence works usually. And then you have the activation, because like Gabby has a great voice, but unless she has a really good song, and she has really good songs, it's not going to be as powerful. So you need to have a thoughtful campaign behind it. And then you need to measure it, because I think all of us are doing this for a purpose of making the world a little bit better. And so we need to measure what's the effect of what we did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So put yourself in the shoes of a Rotary Club here, let's say a Rotary Club in Detroit. And we want to get even more influence in supporting our club. Walk me through what they would do.
Well, I guess, first of all, it would depend upon the...
in terms of research, maybe. Talk about
research, yeah. It would depend upon what is the particular initiative. But I actually have here a list of local Detroit and Windsor celebrities. So that you could, but what you do, you'd research which ones are local, which ones had a certain affinity to your cause. So, and you talked about, was it the White Sox or whatever?
Cubs. Yeah.
Cubs.
Liverpool. No.
Yes. And I have no idea. I mean, soccer and tennis are my thing. But I know, for example, there's people who have worked with different nonprofits. There's Jameer Gibbs from the Detroit Lions. DJ Loaf is local, T. Grizzly. There's the arts. There's a dancer and choreographer called Joint Williams. There's business in the business community, because it's not just actors and musicians, it's whoever's appropriate. So the gentleman, I think, who founded Little Caesars, Marian Illich, him and his family, that might be an interesting one. And then there's people from science and education, like Sabrina Pear, who's an environmentalist. I could go on with many more, and there's a whole group on Windsor, and that took me about 30 seconds on ChatGPT to find those. I mean, you still research them to make sure their reputation is appropriate, because you don't want to sully that. I remember, for example, if I may, when we did the polio campaign.
Yep, you can.
One of the people that was mooted was Mel Gibson, and Mel Gibson had made a very significant donation.
This is about 10 years ago.
10 years ago, yes, 10 years ago. Had made a significant donation.
Right.
And we decided that after doing research... that
you have $1 million to polio.
$1 million, exactly. Yeah. And that should be acknowledged.
Yeah.
But then he had a difficult period, I think, with some alcoholism and stuff, and made some comments that were probably not going to be reflective. So when you're getting for influencers, I think it's very important to do the research for reputation. And if I may, also, don't just go for one. Go for several, because A, it protects your reputation. B, you're going to appeal to different demographics. And I think C would be availability. If the White Sox or whatever are, in the playoffs, which I understand doesn't happen very often, but
doesn't happen with the Cubs either.
Yeah, but basically they're not available. We did one for the American Dental Association with Albert Pujols, who's a baseball player, and we had to wait 2 months till they got knocked out of the playoffs. So I think diversity is very helpful in those three areas.
Yeah, and the research, I think, is a huge point. You want to make sure, I think the other part of it is authenticity. You want to research to align what people are interested in to what you're doing, so it's authentic.
And I should just mention, nobody has been paid. Nobody gets paid. They have to be passionate about it. It's very important.
That's a huge thing. That's a huge thing. So now, as part of your DREAM acronym, one of them is E, which is engage. What are good ways to engage? Actually, before I get to that, can you talk a little bit about persistence and not being too persistent when you're trying to get people involved? Because I think that's always a tough thing.
So, I mean, I've worked, for example, with the recording artist Usher. And Usher gets 40 requests a week to do something. And if he did all of them, he would never be home. And he would never have a career. So I think a very simple email. I have an author's website that has a lot of information for free that you can download. It's paulmkatz.com, and there's a whole resources list there, which gives these kind of templates for emails and all that kind of thing. Send a very simple email. You're starting a conversation. You're not trying to have the whole conversation. And then just follow up every couple of weeks. And don't get frustrated if you don't hear back. You know, just breathe a little bit and just be persistent. Persistence pays off. For example, this is a big one, but I work with a hospital in Haiti for maternal health and children. And I had known that Beyonce had some connections with Haiti. I had never worked with her, didn't know her. And I reached out, and after 18 months, she was going with the UN, and she included the hospital in the visit. So that's just sometimes, and I think Nick in his talk mentioned persistence. And so I think that's a very important factor.
And then when you don't hear anything, and you try, then eventually, let's not annoy the folks. I think.
No.
Yeah,
And also, if you're going after 10 folks, you're not going to get all 10.
Yeah.
You know, in social media, you're going to get more people because it's easier. For someone to turn up at an event is more difficult. So I take a ratio of maybe social media, maybe 1 out of every 3 that you ask will do it, maybe 1 out of 4. If it's an event, maybe it's 1 out of 10. As you know, for the international conferences, it's tricky to get people.
Not easy. That's the one of the final questions I have is just about engagement. What do you do? What's good engagement of someone who's an influencer in your community?
I think it depends on what your club wants to do. So, for example, it could be an event. It could be doing traditional media with, say, the president of the club for the local newspaper, or appearing on the TV or cable. It could be giving an experience. So if you have a recording artist in your community, and you have people that love music, maybe you auction that off. But what you're going to get is you're going to get more visibility and more donations as a result.
And then I guess that 2 final segues. One is just measurement is important. Know what you want to accomplish first, right? But the last thing, I guess, Paul, for you really is if you could leave this group with one takeaway from this, and those who are interested in the book, we can get a copy of it for sure, but leave us with one takeaway.
I think the takeaway would be a quote from Lao Tzu, who's the Chinese philosopher, is that the journey of 1,000 miles starts with 1 step. So you've got to start, otherwise you don't arrive. And hopefully the book will act as a GPS for some folk. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I want to end real quickly with something. So I've known Paul for a long time, worked with him for a long time, and previously I was the director of marketing and communications at Rotary International, and the chief communications job came open, and I went for it. And Jen knows this story that I didn't get it, and I was really disappointed. And a few months later, I was working with Paul on an event, and I was like, some of the things that were happening in the leadership in the comms team it just didn't align with my values. And I was talking to Paul about it, and I said, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. If that's the expectation, I don't think I'm cut out for it. And Paul said to me, you know what? Good guys can win. Which was cool. And lo and behold, a few months, many months later, but months later, the job came open again. And this time I went for it, and I got it. And I became Chief Communications Officer at Rotary, an organization that I love. And I was passionate about it, and I emailed Paul, one of the first things I did. And then a few days later, I get something in the mail, which I still have on my desk. And it says, Dear David, many congratulations. The good guys do win.
I didn't know that. Thank you.
So I just want to thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Very much.
I want to thank you for your counsel over the years, and more importantly, for your work with Rotary International on the Polio Ambassador campaign was tremendous. And then hopefully with some members of this district. And I think I heard one of my favorite phrases, pro bono, in that. And I just thank you so much for everything you do.
Thank you so much. That was a lovely touch. All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you.